Story number 1. I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now and stay with me, because what I am about to tell you is the reason I no longer drive alone at night, the reason I have not taken a highway after dark in over a year, and the reason that when I see a broken down car on the side of the road with its hazard lights blinking in the dark, I press the accelerator down and I do not slow down, I do not look, and I do not stop. Because I stopped once. I stopped to help, and what I found on that shoulder, under those orange hazard lights, in the rain and the dark of a Tuesday night in November, was something that should not exist, something that I cannot explain, something that cracked the foundation of everything I thought I understood about the world and has not let me rebuild it since. I stopped to help a broken down car, and the car was mine. Not similar to mine. Not the same make and model and color in a coincidence that the rational mind could file and dismiss. Mine. My car. My license plate. My cracked rear bumper sticker. My parking permit hanging from the mirror. My specific worn rear left tire that I had been meaning to replace for 3 weeks. My car, sitting on the shoulder of the highway, with the engine off and the hazards running and no one inside. Let me build this for you from the start, because the beginning matters. The beginning is what tells you who I am and why I know that what I experienced was not a mistake, was not a misread, was not the kind of error that tired or frightened minds make on dark roads. I am 34 years old. I drive a 2019 Honda Civic in a color the manufacturer calls Sonic Gray Pearl, which in practical terms means a medium gray with the faintest blue undertone that you only notice in certain light. There are approximately 11,000 Honda Civics registered in my state. Gray is the most common color for that vehicle in that model year. I know this because I looked it up after what happened, looking for the statistical comfort of coincidence, looking for the number that would make what I saw a 1 in 10,000 chance rather than a 1 in 1. The statistical comfort did not arrive. Because the issue is not the make or the model or the color. The issue is the license plate. The issue is the bumper sticker, a faded rectangle from a hiking trail association, the bottom right corner peeled up, something I have been meaning to fix since the summer. The issue is the specific crack in the passenger side mirror housing that happened in a parking garage in March, and that I repaired with black electrical tape in a way that is completely specific to the way I repair things, utilitarian and imprecise. The issue is the parking permit hanging from the rearview mirror, the blue and white laminated card for the residential permit zone I live in, and the way it is angled because the mirror itself was set at a slight leftward tilt by a mechanic who adjusted it incorrectly and that I have never bothered to fix. These are not the features of a car you mistake for another car. These are the features of a single specific car in the world. My car. And my car was on the side of the road. And I was also on the road, approaching it from behind. And for approximately 4 seconds, I did not understand what I was looking at. The night is a Tuesday in November, late enough that the highway is quiet, not empty. There are trucks in the right lane and occasional other cars. But the density of traffic that makes a highway feel inhabited and therefore safe has thinned to something more sparse and provisional. It is raining. Not hard, not a storm, just the persistent moderate rain of a November night that turns every light source into a smear, every headlight into a bloom, every reflection in the wet asphalt into something elongated and slightly wrong. I have been driving for about 40 minutes. I am coming back from my sister's house, which is 2 hours north of where I live, and I made the visit and had dinner and stayed later than I meant to, and I am tired in the pleasant loose way of a good evening winding down, and I am listening to the radio at low volume, and I am thinking about nothing in particular when I see the hazard lights. They are on the right shoulder, maybe a quarter mile ahead. Orange, rhythmic, blinking in the rain. I see them and I feel the automatic mild alertness that hazard lights on a dark highway produce in a responsible driver. The slight straightening, the unconscious ease off the accelerator, the scan of the shoulder for the shape of the vehicle and the presence or absence of people near it. I scan the shoulder. I see the car. I see that it is gray. I see that it is a sedan, a compact sedan, and something in me begins an inventory that I am not consciously aware of yet. The way your brain sometimes begins computing a pattern before your conscious mind has agreed to engage with it. I am doing about 70 miles per hour. At that speed, a quarter mile takes about 13 seconds. In those 13 seconds, I close the distance, and the car on the shoulder comes into definition, comes into detail, and the inventory my brain has been running without my permission reaches a conclusion and presents it to my conscious mind approximately 3 seconds before I draw a level with the car, and what it presents stops my breathing. I know that car. I know that car the way you know your own reflection. I know the exact geometry of it, the proportions of that specific year and trim, the placement of the parking permit, the tilt of the mirror, the electrical tape on the passenger side housing, the peeled corner of the hiking sticker. Every detail arriving in my headlights is a detail I recognize as mine. I do not consciously decide to pull over. I am past the car before I've processed what I've seen, and then I am braking, and then I am pulling onto the shoulder myself, about 50 yards past it, and I sit there with my own hazards going and the rain on the roof, and my hands still on the wheel, and I make myself breathe. I make myself run the logic. Gray Honda Civic. Common car. Common color. Lots of stickers. Parking permits are small and hard to read at speed. The electrical tape. I think about the electrical tape, and I try to build a world in which some other person fixed some other crack in some other mirror housing with black electrical tape applied with the same approximate pressure and imprecision that I use for everything I try to fix myself, and I cannot build that world convincingly enough to sit here and not look. I get out. The rain hits me immediately, not hard but thorough, soaking through my jacket in the way November rain does, and I start walking back along the shoulder toward the car. The highway is loud. Trucks pass in the right lane, and each one displaces air that hits me in a wave, and I lean into it. And I keep walking, and I keep my eyes on the car as I approach it, and with every step another detail arrives and confirms what I already know. I am 10 feet away when I can read the license plate. I stop walking. The plate is mine. My specific combination of letters and numbers, the registration sticker in the upper right corner with this year's color, the slight bend in the bottom left corner from when I backed into a low concrete barrier in the parking lot of my apartment complex 2 years ago, and bent the plate slightly without cracking it. I have not moved. I am standing 10 feet from my own car on the shoulder of a highway in the rain at 11 o'clock at night, and the car is empty. I can see through the windshield, through the rain-blurred glass, that there is no one in the driver's seat, no one in the passenger seat. The back seat is dark, but I can see its shape and it reads as empty. The engine is off. The hazards are on. The car is just sitting there, on the shoulder, running its hazards in the rain, presenting itself to the world as a broken-down vehicle in need of assistance. I walk to the driver's side window. I cup my hands against the glass and I look inside. It is my car. The interior is my interior. The specific wear pattern on the driver's seat fabric, the phone mount on the dashboard of the brand I prefer, the reusable coffee cup in the cup holder that I know because I have one exactly like it, and it is currently in my car, the car I drove here in and parked 50 yards up the shoulder. I look at the cup holder of this car, and the coffee cup in it is the same cup. Same color, same brand, same slight dent in the lower rim where I dropped it on pavement once. I look at the back seat, and I see on the seat a jacket. A gray fleece jacket. I own a gray fleece jacket. I am wearing a gray fleece jacket. The jacket on the back seat of this car is folded in the specific way that I fold jackets when I place them on back seats. One arm folded over the body, the collar turned in, a habit I don't think about, but apparently repeat with enough consistency that it is recognizable to me as mine. I step back. I step back from the car and I stand in the rain on the shoulder and I look at it, and I am aware of a sensation I have never experienced before and have not been able to accurately name since. It is not fear exactly. Fear has a directionality to it, a specific threat that generates a specific response. This is something more disorienting than fear. This is the sensation of the coherence of reality becoming briefly, fundamentally questionable. The sensation of looking at something that should not exist and feeling the ground of your certainty shift under it. I look at this car, this impossible car, and I feel the world I live in become slightly less solid. I take out my phone. My hands are wet, and it takes me 2 attempts to unlock it. I open the camera and I photograph the license plate, and I photograph the driver's side exterior, and I photograph the interior through the glass, and I photograph the hiking sticker with its peeled corner, and I photograph the electrical tape on the mirror housing. 7 photographs. I put my phone back in my pocket and I stand there in the rain and I try to decide what to do next, and I cannot decide. I cannot build a next action that feels proportionate to what I am experiencing. What do you do when you find your own car on the highway at night? What do you do when you have driven to this highway in your own car? When your own car is parked 50 yards up the shoulder, when the car you are standing next to is by every measurable criterion the same car? I try to call the police and I get as far as opening the phone app before I stop. Because what do I say? Because there is no category for this call. I am standing there, in the rain, not moving, looking at this car, and then the hazard lights stop. No warning, no fade, just off, the way a device turns off when its battery dies, and the shoulder is suddenly very dark. My own headlights 50 yards up illuminate a small cone of rain-wet asphalt and nothing else. I take a step back. My heel finds the edge of the shoulder and drops a half-inch off the pavement, and I catch myself and I take another step back and I keep my eyes on the car, and the car is dark and still and present and wrong. I go back to my car. I do not run. I am telling you this not as a point of pride but as a fact, because I think running would have been a reasonable response, and I did not run because something told me not to. Something told me that running from this, that turning my back on this, was specifically inadvisable in a way that just being afraid of a dark car on a highway didn't fully account for. I back up. I walk backward on the shoulder with my face toward that dark car until I am at my own car. And then I get in and I lock the doors and I sit there and I look in my rearview mirror at the shape of it in the darkness behind me. I pull out. I drive. I drive for about 4 miles, and then I have to stop at a rest area because my hands are shaking too badly to maintain a safe grip on the wheel. And I sit in the lit rest area parking lot surrounded by trucks and the yellow warmth of the building's exterior lights, and I look at my photographs. The photographs are there, all 7 of them. I open them one by one, and they are exactly what I took them to be. The license plate, the exterior, the interior through glass, the sticker, the tape. I zoom into the license plate photo. It is my plate. I look at the photo of the interior, and I look at the coffee cup in the cup holder, and I look at the jacket on the back seat, and I look at the phone mount on the dashboard. Empty, because whoever or whatever was in that car last did not have a phone mounted there, or took the phone when they left, or there was never a phone because there was never a person, because this car has no person. This car has no driver. This car is mine and also exists independently on the shoulder of a highway at night. And those 2 facts will not resolve into anything I can live inside comfortably. I check the photographs one more time before I go. I am looking for the detail I missed, the thing that makes this ordinary. I zoom into the interior shot, the one I took with my face against the glass, and I look at the back seat and the jacket, and I look more carefully because something about it is pulling at me. Something is slightly wrong about the jacket in the way that the whole night has been wrong, and then I see it. It takes me a full minute to see it, to organize what I'm seeing into something my brain will accept as an image with meaning. And when I see it, I put my phone face down on the passenger seat, and I start driving, and I do not look at the photographs again for 3 days. In the jacket on the back seat. In the right-hand pocket of the folded jacket. A hand. Not attached to anything. just a hand, pressed flat against the inside of the pocket, visible as a shape through the fabric, the fingers slightly spread, pressing outward, as if something inside the pocket is reaching for the glass. I drive home. I check my own back seat before I get in, and I check it twice more at red lights, and I check it when I arrive home, and I park in my assigned space, and I go inside, and I lock my door, and I check the photographs at 3 in the morning when I can't sleep, and I confirm what I saw, and I go to the window, and I look down at the parking lot at my car sitting in its space under the parking lot light, and it is my car, and it is the only car that looks like mine in this lot, and the parking lot light is turning the rain into silver threads, and I watch my car for a long time, and it doesn't move and nothing happens, and eventually I step back from the window, and I go to bed, and I lie there in the dark with my eyes open. I have not driven alone at night since November. When I have to be somewhere after dark, I arrange company, or I take rideshare, or I leave before sunset. My colleagues think I have developed a highway anxiety issue in the clinical sense, a driving phobia, and I have not corrected them. My sister, who I was visiting that night, knows the broad strokes. I called her 3 days later and described what happened, and she listened without interrupting, which is not her usual mode. And when I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Do you want me to drive with you for a while?" And that was the kindest thing anyone has said to me since this happened, and I said yes, and I meant it. There is one more thing. About a month after, I am cleaning my car. Interior detail, something I do seasonally. I am going through the back seat, vacuuming, and I feel something in the left rear seat pocket, the fabric pocket on the back of the driver's seat, the one that's usually empty, that I use for nothing. I reach in. I pull out a phone I do not recognize, in a case I do not own, powered down, the battery dead. I charge it for half an hour before I can turn it on. When it turns on, it asks for a passcode. The passcode, when I try my own out of some instinct I don't fully understand, does not work. None of my usual codes work. I try for 20 minutes and none of them work. The phone stays locked. I can only see the lock screen, which shows the wallpaper the way lock screens do. The wallpaper is a photograph. The photograph is taken from a driver's seat, looking forward through a windshield at a rainy highway at night, and in the right shoulder of the photograph there is a car with its hazard lights on. The car in the photograph is my car. My gray Civic, unmistakable, parked on the shoulder. Taken from the perspective of someone sitting in a car behind mine. Someone who pulled over to help. Someone who saw my car on the shoulder of the highway at night, in the rain, exactly the way I saw it, and who stopped. And the timestamp on the photograph, visible in the lock screen display, reads a date that is 3 weeks before the night I stopped. Story number 2. If you are someone who camps alone, if you are someone who finds comfort in the solitude of remote places, in the particular peace of sleeping in the dark away from everything, I need you to sit down before I tell you this. Because what happened to me in those mountains is going to change the way you think about that peace. It is going to change the way you think about the small material boundary between yourself and the outside, the thin nylon wall of a tent, the way you trust those zippers to hold. Because they did not hold for me. Every single one of them was undone. Not from the inside, where I was sleeping. From the outside, where I was not. Something was outside my tent in the dark of a remote mountain at 2 in the morning, and it opened every zip on my tent. The door fly, the inner door, the side ventilation panel, the gear pocket, all of them, with the patience and deliberateness of something that knew exactly what it was doing, and I was inside, sleeping, trusting those zippers, not knowing. And I want you to understand the full weight of what I am telling you before I take you back to the beginning and build this for you properly. I am 29 years old. I have been wild camping since I was 17, which means I have 12 years of nights spent alone in tents in places that don't appear on tourist maps, places you reach by hiking in for hours, places where the nearest other human might be 3 miles away or 10 miles away, or theoretically nobody at all away. And the only sounds are weather and animals, and the small sounds that forests and mountains make at night that you learn to distinguish from each other and from threat over time. I am comfortable alone in the outdoors in the way that only 12 years of regular practice can make you comfortable. I do not scare easily in the field. I do not startle at branches. I know the difference between the movement of a deer in undergrowth and the movement of something larger and more considered, and I know what to do in either case. And I know how to read the specific quality of silence that means there is nothing nearby versus the quality of silence that means something nearby has gone quiet. I tell you this because I want you to know that what alarmed me on that mountain was not nothing, was not my own anxiety in the dark, was not the ordinary strangeness of the wild that inexperienced campers mistake for something sinister. What alarmed me was specific and real and impossible to explain with reference to anything I had encountered in 12 years of nights in the field. The trip is 3 days into a 5-day solo route in a mountain range I have hiked before, a range in the north of the country where the terrain is serious and the weather is changeable and the trails are good, but the distances between them mean you spend significant stretches in country with no trail at all, navigating by map and compass and the shape of the land. Day 3 I push hard, covering more distance than I planned because the weather is cooperating and my legs feel strong, and I end up making camp later than I intended, pitching my tent in a location I have not scouted in advance. It is a flat shelf on the lee side of a granite ridge, protected from the prevailing wind, with a view east down the valley that in the evening light is one of the best things I have ever seen from a campsite. The shelf is maybe 30 feet wide and 40 feet long. Behind me is the ridge wall, vertical, unscalable, on 3 sides, east, north, south. The shelf drops away to the slope below, not a sheer drop, but steep enough and exposed enough that reaching my campsite from any of those 3 directions requires either ascending the slope I came up on or descending a significant gradient. In short, it is not a location you arrive at accidentally. It is not a location you wander into. Reaching this shelf requires intention and significant effort. I pitch my tent. I cook. I eat looking out at the valley in the last of the light, and I drink a cup of tea, and I feel the specific, deep satisfaction of being exactly where I want to be, tired in the good way, far from everything that isn't mountain and sky, and the cooling air of elevation. I check my gear, which is habit. I go through a short mental list before dark every night in the field, confirming the location of my emergency kit, my bear canister, my water, my navigation gear. Everything is where it should be. I zip the inner door of my tent, zip the fly, zip the gear pocket at the foot end where I keep my boots, zip the small ventilation panel on the north side that I leave partially open for airflow in good weather, but which I close when I go to sleep. I lie down. I am asleep in under 10 minutes. I want to tell you about the zippers on my tent because the zippers matter, and I want you to understand them before we get to the morning. The tent is a high-quality 4-season model I have used for 7 years. It has 6 zippered closures total. The main door has a 2-way zipper, inner and outer, operated by 2 separate pulls. The rainfly door zips separately, overlapping the inner. There is a ventilation panel on the north wall with its own zipper pull. There is a gear vestibule at the foot end, a shallow external pocket for boots and wet gear with its own zipper. And there is the structural zipper that connects the fly to the tent body at the base seam, which I almost never open in the field and which requires specific knowledge of the tent's design to even locate. 6 zippers, all of them closed when I fell asleep. All of them operated from the interior when I closed them, because I am inside the tent when I go to sleep, and the pulls are on the inside. To close them from outside is possible, but it requires reaching in, which means the door must already be open. To open them from outside requires pulling the external handle, which all 6 zippers have, because this is a good tent designed for emergency access. but which requires knowing where each pole is, requires intent, requires moving around the tent systematically and opening each closure in turn. I wake up at 2:14 in the morning. I know the time because the first thing I do when I become aware that something is wrong is look at my watch. And my watch says 2:14, and I save that number in my memory because it matters, and I know immediately that it matters. I wake up because I am cold. Not cold in the way of a night that got colder than expected while you were warm in your sleeping bag. I have a good sleeping bag, rated below the expected overnight temperature, and I am not cold inside it. I am cold because there is air moving across my face. There is air moving across my face, and it is the outside air of a mountain at 2 in the morning, and I am inside a four-season tent, and that air should not be reaching my face. I open my eyes. The tent is open. Both the inner door zipper and the fly zipper are open, and the north ventilation panel is open, and the gear vestibule is open, and the base seam structural zipper has been run back 6 inches, and when I sit up and turn on my headlamp and look at my own tent and the beam of it, I can see that every closure is undone, and the tent walls are breathing in the mountain wind, and the night is right there, immediately there. The dark bulk of the ridge behind me and the open shelf in front of me, and the valley below, and the three-quarter moon painting everything in silver and black. Everything open. Everything. Including the structural zipper that I have not opened myself in 2 years of using this tent. I sit up fully. I have my headlamp. I put my boots on. They are in the gear vestibule where I left them, untouched, which is a detail I come back to later, the fact that my boots were left alone while everything around them was methodically opened. I sit in the mouth of the open tent on the shelf of granite, and I shine my light around the space, and I look for the thing that did this. There is nothing on the shelf. The light reaches all 3 edges and shows me rock and scrub grass and the beginning of the slope down, and there is nothing there. I shine the light up the ridge face behind me, and the ridge face is blank granite rising into darkness. There is nothing here. Whatever was here is not here now. I check myself. This is the clinical thing I do, the thing 12 years of outdoor experience has trained me to do in unusual situations before I allow the unusual to become frightening. I check myself first. Am I fully awake? Was I sleepwalking? Could I have opened these zippers myself in some state between sleeping and waking and have no memory of it? I open zippers in my sleep sometimes when I'm too warm. I know this. It has happened before. I run the specific inventory: inner door, fly door, north vent, gear vestibule, structural base seam. 5 separate actions. 5 separate zipper locations, some of which require moving to different parts of the tent, some of which require specific knowledge of the tent's construction. Could I have performed all 5 of these actions in a sleepwalking state and returned to my sleeping bag? My sleeping bag is closed around me. I am still in my sleeping bag. The zipper of my sleeping bag is closed. If I had been up moving around the tent in my sleep, the sleeping bag zipper would be open. My boots, which I take off every night and zip into the vestibule as the last action before I sleep, are in the vestibule, zipped in. If I had been sleepwalking and opened the vestibule, I likely would have stepped into my boots as I always do. My boots have no mud on them, no sign of use, no sign of having been put on and taken off in the night. I did not open these zippers. I lie down on this conclusion the way you lie down on ground you've tested for stability. I did not open these zippers. Something else did. I look at the moonlit shelf. I look at the edges of it. I look at the slope below where you would go if you were descending after doing what was done to this tent. The slope is open and bare in the moonlight, and nothing moves on it. Whatever it was, it is fast, or it was never on the slope at all, or it went away I can't see from here. I think about the ridge face. I think about whether you could go up. I think about a thing that can move vertically on bare granite in the dark, and I shut that line of thinking down. I do not go back to sleep. I sit in the open mouth of the tent for the rest of the night with my headlamp off so that its light doesn't reduce my night vision, and I listen. I have spent 12 years learning to listen to wild country at night, and I am as good at it as an untrained human can be, which is not as good as what the dark produced that night, but better than nothing. I listen for the specific quality of intentional presence, the held breath of something watching, the particular absence of ambient noise that indicates a predator in proximity, the sound of displacement on rock or in grass. I listen for 4 hours until the sky begins to lighten in the east, and the valley below me begins to separate from the darkness, and the granite ridge behind me begins to glow with the first pale warmth of early dawn. In that growing light, I walk the perimeter of the shelf, and I look for marks. I know what I'm looking for. I know the substrate. I know what leaves impressions in what conditions. I know what different animals leave and what they don't leave. The granite takes nothing. The scrub grass at the edges of the shelf is too sparse and too hardy to hold clear impressions. But at the southern edge, where the shelf meets the slope, where the slope is steep and loose and composed of smaller stones over packed dirt, I find something. Not a full print. Not something I can photograph and present as evidence. More like a series of disturbances. Places where the loose stone has been displaced, where the packed dirt underneath has been compressed in a pattern that is not the pattern of wind or water or the settling of talus. A pattern of something heavy and not small moving across this substrate. I follow the disturbances down the slope for about 40 feet, and then the slope becomes solid rock again, and the trail goes cold, and I am standing on a granite face in the early morning with the wind off the ridge cooling my face, and there is nothing to follow anymore. I go back to camp. I pack. I pack faster than I have ever packed in 12 years. I pack with the efficiency of someone performing a task they know they need to complete quickly, and I am off that shelf and moving down the valley by 7 in the morning, and I do not look back at the shelf as I descend, which is another specific thing my body decided for me. The way the body decides these things when it has information the mind hasn't fully accepted yet. I finish the route. I do not cut it short. I am maybe slightly irrationally proud of this. I finish the 5 days. I sleep in different locations for the remaining 2 nights. I close my zippers and I sleep lightly, and I am vigilant and nothing happens. But nothing happening is not the same as being okay. Nothing happening for 2 nights on a mountain after what happened on night 3 is its own kind of dread. The sustained alertness, the quality of sleep that is barely sleep, the way every normal sound becomes a candidate for the abnormal before being dismissed. I am home for 3 weeks when I go back through my photographs from the trip. I take a lot of photographs in the field, landscape, light, camp setups, gear I want to review later. I scroll through 400 images from those 5 days, and I reach night 3 and I find something I do not remember taking and do not know how I took. It is a photograph. It is time-stamped 4:47 a.m. The photograph is taken from inside the tent, pointing outward through the open inner door, toward the open fly, toward the moonlit shelf outside. And in the photograph, just at the edge of the frame, just at the point where the moonlight ends and the shadow of the ridge begins, there is a shape. I have spent a lot of time with this photograph. I have zoomed in. I have adjusted the contrast and brightness. It is not a clear image. It is not the kind of image that resolves into a definitive answer when you look at it long enough. But it is large. What I can see of it is large. And it is bipedal, or it has a bipedal arrangement, or it is positioned in a way that a bipedal thing would be positioned if it were standing at the edge of a shelf at 4:47 in the morning watching someone sleep. I cannot tell you what it is. I cannot tell you that this is the thing that opened my zippers because I have no proof that it is, and I will not claim proof I don't have. What I can tell you is that my phone was inside my tent, and the photograph is on my phone, and the photograph is of the outside of my tent taken from the inside. And I do not remember taking it. And I was awake from 2:14 onward, and I would remember raising my phone to take a photograph, and I did not take this photograph. My phone screen does not illuminate in this photograph. It was taken in darkness, without flash, and the image is dark and the shape is at the edge of it, and I look at it some nights and I try to decide what I am seeing. Whatever opened those zippers, it was looking in before it opened them. Whatever opened those zippers stood at the edge of that shelf in the dark of a remote mountain and looked at a closed tent containing a sleeping man, and then, with patience and with method, and with the specific knowledge of how the closures of that tent worked, it opened every single one of them. And what I cannot stop thinking about, what has followed me home from those mountains and lives in the corner of my awareness in the specific way that unresolved things live there, is this: it opened them and it did not come in. It opened every door and every window of the only shelter I had on that mountain, and it stood outside, and it looked, and it did not come in. And I have been trying, for the months since, to decide whether that means it was not ready or whether it means it was making a point, whether it was communication, whether what it was doing to those zippers was the equivalent of a knock, an introduction, a demonstration of access. Here is what I can do. Here is how easily I can take away the small thing that makes you feel safe. Here is the open door. And you are welcome to wonder, every night you spend in the field from now on, whether I am on the other side of it. I still camp. I camp in established sites with other people nearby. I do not wild camp alone anymore. I have a new tent. Its zippers are the same as the old tent zippers, as all tent zippers are, small and light and functional and designed to keep out weather. They are not designed to keep out intent. Nothing so small has ever been designed to keep out intent. I know that now in a way I didn't know before, and knowing it has changed the way the dark feels, has made it larger and more occupied than it was before, has made the space outside a tent feel less like absence and more like presence, more like something that is there whether I acknowledge it or not, patient as stone, waiting at the edge of the shelf in the moonlight with its hands already on the zipper pull. Story number 3. What I found at the bottom of that lake should have stayed there. I mean that in the practical sense, in the sense that what I found was a closed case, a thing the world had covered over with water and years and silt, and the specific forgetting that deep water enables, and pulling it back into the light did not help anyone, least of all me. But I also mean it in another sense that I only came to understand later, after the dream started, and after I began looking into the history of that lake, and after I found the records that I found and understood what they meant. I mean that what was at the bottom of that lake should have stayed there because it was not done. Whatever had been happening in that car, whatever the man in the driver's seat had been doing in the last moments before he went under, it was not finished, and finding him, bringing him into the light of my dive computer and my camera, and eventually the official light of a recovery operation, disturbed something that had been settling, had been concluding, had been moving towards some resolution in the dark and the cold and the deep. I found a man's skeleton in a car at the bottom of a lake. The skeleton was buckled in. The phone was in his hand. And the phone, when the recovery divers brought everything up and the investigators laid it out, and I was brought in for questions, the phone had a signal. Not service. No lake bottom car wreck should have service. A signal. An active transmission. And what it was transmitting, what the forensic tech who examined it showed me on her screen with an expression I will not forget, was a message. A message being composed. A message addressed to a number that the investigators traced within 48 hours. A number that, when I tell you whose it was, is going to make you understand why I have not been in open water since. Let me take you to the beginning. Let me take you to the day of the dive. I have been a recreational diver for 9 years. I started in the ocean, certification in warm, shallow Caribbean water, the ideal learning environment, and over time developed a specific interest in freshwater diving, particularly lake diving, which is a different discipline from ocean diving in ways that are difficult to explain to non-divers, but that matter enormously in practice. Lakes are dark. The water clarity in most freshwater environments is a fraction of what you get in good saltwater conditions, which means your visibility is limited, sometimes drastically, which means your world shrinks to the radius of your dive light, and whatever is in that radius is all there is. Lakes are cold. Even in summer, thermoclines drop the water temperature sharply below the first 20 or 30 feet, and below that it is close to freezing, and cold does specific things to the body and to gear that warm water divers never encounter. And lakes have floors. They have a specific, bounded floor, and unlike the ocean, you are always descending towards something definite, something you can reach, and what is on that floor has not been moved by current or wave action and has not been visited often and accumulates the specific archaeology of stillness over time. The lake I'm describing is in a rural part of the upper Midwest, maybe an hour from the nearest city of any size, in a landscape of agricultural fields and woodlets, and the kind of roads that are 2 lanes and straight and lined with trees that meet overhead in summer and stand bare and skeletal in winter. The lake is about 1.5 miles across at its widest point, and according to the surveys I looked up afterward, has a maximum depth of 68 feet. It has a local reputation for good fishing and a more specialized reputation in the small community of freshwater divers who know about it, for decent visibility in the late summer when the algae bloom has passed. I have dived it twice before, once in September 2 years ago, once the following spring. Both times I found nothing unusual. The typical lake floor archaeology of lost tackle and old bottles, and the occasional larger artifact of submerged dock or sunken rowboat. The day I'm describing is a Saturday in late August. I drive out alone, which I do sometimes despite knowing it is not best practice. Solo diving carries risks that paired diving doesn't, and in a remote lake with no one nearby, those risks are not trivial. I have an inflatable surface marker buoy. I have my emergency kit. I have good gear and 9 years of experience, and I make the calculation that experienced divers sometimes make that I am comfortable enough with the environment and competent enough in my practice that the risk is acceptable. I make this calculation and I go in, and I will tell you later what I think about that calculation now, what I think about the specific combination of confidence and isolation that put me in the water alone that day. I think about it often. I enter the water at the small gravel beach on the east shore, which is the usual entry point for divers, and I descend on a bearing of 270, roughly west, which takes me out into the deeper central basin of the lake. The visibility is acceptable, maybe 15 feet, which is good for this lake in this season. The light from the surface falls in diminishing columns through the water above me and fades before it reaches the floor, which at this point is about 50 feet down. I am carrying my primary dive light, a powerful handheld unit, and my backup clip-on. I reach the floor at 52 feet according to my dive computer, and I orient myself, and I begin moving, slowly, in a systematic grid pattern, which is how I explore lake floors, because systematic coverage is how you find things. For the first 20 minutes, I find nothing remarkable. Silt, rocks, aquatic vegetation in the shallower margins, an area of rocky substrate in the center that gives way to soft silt further west, a large catfish, 2 lost lures, a child's bicycle, almost certainly rolled in from the shore at some point, now heavily fouled with algae and silted in on one side, a very old bicycle by the frame geometry, something from the 60s or 70s. I photograph it because it is interesting and I move on. I am at 47 minutes into the dive, my air at roughly 60%, and I am moving in a northwesterly direction along the floor when my light catches something at the edge of its range. Something metal. The reflection of my light on metal has a specific quality that I have learned to recognize over 9 years. It is cooler and more uniform than the reflection of glass or the dull scatterback of rock or silt, and it has an organization to it, a geometric regularity that organic material never has. I see this reflection and I adjust my bearing toward it, and I fin forward, and the shape of it resolves as I close the distance and I stop moving. It is a car, a sedan, fully upright on the lake floor, settled into the silt to a depth of maybe 4 inches at the wheels, which tells me it has been here long enough for silt to accumulate around it, but perhaps not as long as you'd think. Silt accumulation in this lake, based on what I know of the local hydrology, is slow. The car is a domestic sedan from what I can see, an American make, the style consistent with the late 90s or very early 2000s. The paint has been almost entirely consumed by years in the water, but the primer beneath it shows in patches and the body panels retain their shape. The windows are intact. I can see this from outside the car, see the glass still seated in its rubber, which is remarkable in itself. Most submerged vehicles break their glass. The windows of this car are intact, and they are dark, opaque with the algae film that grows on underwater glass, and I hang in the water outside it with my light pointed at it, and I feel the specific, complicated feeling that you feel when you find something significant on a lake floor, part discovery, part solemnity, part the sharp, cold alertness of understanding that you are the first person to see this, that whatever is in this car has not been seen by human eyes in years or decades. I fin around the exterior. Driver's side, hood, passenger side, trunk. The trunk is closed. The hood is closed. The passenger windows match the driver's side, intact, filmed with algae. The front passenger door has a slight inward deformation at the lower panel, a dent that is too regular and specific to be impact damage from the lake entry, more like a low-speed collision from years before the submersion. I complete my exterior circuit, and I come to rest beside the driver's door, and I shine my light at the driver's side window, and I put my face close to the glass, and I clear the film from a section of it with my glove, and I look inside. I don't move for a long time after I look inside. I am aware of my breathing, the slow measured exhalation of a trained diver, and I am aware that my breathing has changed, has become something I am having to consciously manage rather than something that simply happens, and I am aware of the cold of the water and of the specific quality of the silence of a lake floor, which is not the silence of an empty room, but the silence of a pressurized space, a weighted silence, a silence that has mass. I am aware of all of these things, and I am looking through the glass at what is in the driver's seat. It is a skeleton, a human skeleton, nearly complete, seated upright in the driver's seat of this car at the bottom of this lake. The seat belt is across it, the shoulder belt, the diagonal strap that crosses the chest, still buckled at the waist, still doing the specific job it was designed to do, holding this figure in this seat, as if the car might still need the occupant to be secured for travel. The hands are in the lap, mostly. The left hand is in the lap. The right hand is raised slightly, raised to approximately the height of the center console, and in the right hand, held between the disarticulated metacarpals, lodged between finger bones with the particular security of something that was gripped tightly when the grip was a grip and that the bones have settled around in all the years since, is a phone, a rectangle of glass and metal, a smartphone, sitting in the skeletal right hand of the person in the driver's seat of a car at the bottom of a lake. I photograph everything. I am a diver, and I have training, and I have protocols, and the protocol in this situation is to document and surface and report. I photograph the car from multiple angles. I photograph the interior through the driver's window. I photograph the seatbelt. I photograph the phone in the right hand. I surface. I reach my towel on the gravel beach, and I sit down on it, and I take off my mask, and I call the county sheriff's department, and I report what I found, and I give them my GPS coordinates, and I wait. The recovery operation takes 2 days. Divers, a crane barge, ultimately the whole car brought up in a sling of rigging. I am asked to stay local, and I do. I answer questions. I show them my photographs. On the second day, a detective I have been speaking with asks me to come to the recovery site, which is a boat launched 2 miles from where I entered the water, and he walks me around the car where it sits on the gravel, draining, in the afternoon light, and he shows me the interior, and he shows me the phone in the evidence bag. And then he tells me 2 things. The first thing is that the phone, when it was extracted, had battery. Not much. The forensic examiner said it was the kind of residual charge that sometimes survives in devices that have been kept cold and undisturbed. A ghost charge, a few percentage points of capacity remaining in a battery that should have been long dead. It was active. It had a signal, not cellular service, but a Bluetooth transmission, a local broadcast, as if the phone had been trying to sync with something or send something to something in its immediate range. He shows me the screen of the forensic examiner's laptop, where she has captured the transmission data. It is a message, a text message, composition in progress, text in the message body, addressed to a number, and the message in the body is 3 words. 3 words that were being typed, presumably, in the moment of submersion, that were never completed, that have been waiting at the bottom of this lake in the hand of a dead man for, based on the initial forensic estimate of the remains, which the detective tells me is context, approximately 23 years. I look at the message. 3 words in the composition field of a 23-year-old phone transmitting from the bottom of a lake. 3 words that read. They are telling me, like a message not yet sent, like something someone was trying to say when the water came in and they couldn't say it anymore. The second thing the detective tells me is about the number. The number the message was addressed to. He tells me they ran it immediately, standard procedure, and that it is no longer in service, which is expected for a 23-year-old contact. Numbers get recycled, carriers reassign them. This is routine. But numbers that are no longer in service still have an original registration history, and when they pull the original registration history on this number, they find that it was assigned, at the time of first registration in the late 90s, to a person. He tells me the name. He tells me the name, and I write it down because he is telling me to remember it, and later that night in the motel room where I am staying, I look the name up, and I find the records, the local newspaper archives from 23 years ago, and I find the story, and when I read it I understand why the detective looked at me the way he did when he told me. The number belongs to a man. The man registered the number in 1997. The man is dead. He died in a car accident on the rural road that runs along the north shore of this lake, 119 days after the forensic estimate of the submersion of the car I found. He drove off the road at night, into the lake. They found his car in the water. They found him in the driver's seat. He was buckled in. The investigation concluded, accident, single vehicle, no suspicious circumstances. The man in the driver's seat of the car I found, the man who has been sitting at the bottom of this lake for 23 years with his phone in his hand, was trying to send a message to a man who died driving into the same lake, 119 days later. And the message, the 3 words in the composition field of that 23-year-old phone, the 3 words that were being typed when the water came in. I am going to tell you what they are, and I want you to think about them carefully, because I have been thinking about them since August, and they have not let me sleep a whole night through since. The 3 words are, he is here, not I am here, not help me, not calling for rescue or signaling location. He is here, a third party, someone else, someone that the man in the driver's seat, in the moments before or during submersion, needed to communicate the presence of to the man who would, 119 days later, die in this same lake on this same road in what would be called an accident. He is here. A warning. A transmission about a third presence. A third party that neither of the 2 men in this story survived encountering. A thing that was here 23 years ago when the first car went in, and that was here 119 days later when the second car went in, and that has been here, presumably, since, in the dark and the cold, in the 68 feet of water, waiting with the patience of things that do not need to surface, that do not need air, that do not need anything that the world above the water has to offer. I have not dived since August. I look at the photographs I took sometimes. The skeleton, the seatbelt, the phone in the hand. I look at them and I think about the transmission, the ghost charge, the Bluetooth broadcast sending those 3 words into the water around it for whoever might receive them. I think about the fact that I was in the water. I think about my dive computer, which also receives Bluetooth. I think about whether, in the 47 minutes I was in that water before I found the car, my dive computer received the broadcast. I check the log. I always check the log. In the log data for that dive, at 31 minutes, there is a Bluetooth connection event. A paired device. A device that is not my backup light or my surface marker or my camera or any of my gear. A device that my computer logged as connected for 4 seconds at a depth of 44 feet and then lost. I don't know what it connected to. I don't know what those 4 seconds transmitted or received. I know that at 31 minutes and 44 feet, I was moving along the floor of a lake in which a man has been sitting buckled in his car for 23 years, trying to tell someone that something is here. And I know that for 4 seconds something found my device in the dark and touched it. And I know that whatever it is, it has been in that lake for at least 23 years, and it was there when I was in the water, and I was alone, and I surfaced, and it did not follow. Or it has not followed yet. Or the following is something I won't know about until I'm in water again. Until I'm deep enough and far enough down and surrounded by enough dark that he is here would be exactly the right thing to be trying to say. If only there were someone above the water to receive it.